Good morning. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, looking specifically at statistics, but even beyond just the actual stats or the math itself, we're going to explore how we can use technology, how we can use tools like Excel in order to help us compute statistical measures like mean, median, and mode a lot more efficiently. Now, before we jump into Excel, let's see if we can just take a quick recap as to what mean, median, and mode actually are, what they mean,
What do you mean?
how we can compute them by hand. I love technology just as much as the next person, but it's always important to be careful with the technology and make sure that you're not just kind of using it mindlessly, but rather have a good kind of concrete understanding of what's going on, of the concept that you're working with, and how the technology executes that concept, executes that process, as well as its limitations in doing so. And so let's take a quick recap here. Mean, median, and mode are all measures of central tendency. What that means is that if we are given a data set, these are ways that we can sort of tell what the center of that data looks like whereabout is the middle of this data set. So let's say, for instance, that we were given a data set of test scores. And let's say those tests were scored out of 100% and they looked something like 89, 93, 62, 75, 84, 75, 0, 97, and 77 and 73. We can use mean, median, and mode to help us understand kind of whereabouts the center of this data lies. We want to be able to paint a picture of what's going on with this data and summarize what's going on with this data in just a few numbers rather than reading out the entire list of test scores. And so we'll use these measures to do something like that. The mean, first of all,
What do you mean?
accomplishes this by taking the sum of all of the data points. That's what this symbol here means, right? This symbol is the sum of all of the data points x. And so the mean is the sum of all of the data points divided by n, which is the number of data points, right? So we can say this is the sum of the data divided by the number of points, right? And so in this case, we would add all of these up, 89 plus 93 plus 62, and so on. Because there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 data points, we will divide this by 10. And when we add all this up, this is going to equal to 725, right? And when we divide 725 by 10, that's going to give us 72.5. And so we can say our mean, also frequently known as the average, we tend to use those words interchangeably a lot, but the mean, or the average of these test scores, is 72.5. Now, adding all of these up, when you have a lot of them, right, say 100 students took this test, that would get quite tedious. And so what we can do is take advantage of some of the tools in Excel to make this a little bit easier. Now, Excel is an incredibly powerful program, and this is kind of only really just the start of what it can do. But if you do have a collection of data and you enter that data in, let's do that here, 89, 93, 62, and so on, we'll be able to use this to compute things like the mean using what's called a function. And now it's really simple to do this. We can come over to the space right below the column where our data is listed. And if we click on that space and type equals, what that's going to tell Excel is that we're about to plug in some kind of function or formula to use to do some kind of math and to make this cell A11 equal to whatever the outcome of the function or formula that we input is. And so Excel has a nice function for mean, otherwise known as average, which is just average. And so you can type average, and you'll see here a bunch of different functions that it has will come up. For now, we're just going to use the regular straight up average. And so we can click that. And now all you have to do then is enter all of the numbers that you want to take the average of, and it's going to be able to compute that for you. Now, the nice thing about Excel is that because we have all of these listed out in columns, we actually don't have to enter them all individually like we might on a normal calculator. We can come up to our very first one, we can click and drag all the way down to include all of the data, right? And you'll see here, this reads out A1, which is the cell with the 89, colon, which stands for through, so A1 through A10, which is our cell with the 73. And now, once we close this with a closed parentheses, once we hit enter, it's going to compute the average of all of these numbers that are highlighted in blue, all of these numbers that range from cell A1 to cell A10. And when we hit enter, we get 72.5, which is what we found when we did this out by hand. And so even for collections of data that are absolutely massive, Excel is going to be able to compute the averages for you fairly quickly if you just list all of the numbers out and use the average function as we did here. And now we can take a look at the median. And the median is also a measure of central tendency, but it does work a little bit differently. When we think median, we can essentially think middle, as in what is the middle value. In other words, if you were to order your data from the smallest value all the way to the largest value, which value falls in the center? Now, this can happen in one of two ways, depending on how many data points you have. Specifically, if you have an odd number of data points, right, say like 5, say each of these x's represented 1, this works really nicely because the middle value, right, if we were to kind of cancel out evenly on both sides, the middle value is just a single number. And in that case, that's our median. This becomes a little bit trickier when we have an even number of data points, right? Say we had 6, for instance. Here we can't move 3 from one side and 3 from the other and pick the one that's in the middle because there wouldn't be anything there. And so instead, we're going to be left with 2 values in the middle. And when that's the case, we have to take the average of both of those. And you'll see what I mean by that in just a second, because in our case here, we have 10 data points. So that's going to fit the even case. And so let's take a look at our data and see if we can put it in order from smallest to largest. Right, we start with 0, 62, 73, 75, 75, 77, 84, 89, 93, and 97. And so if we went one at a time and moved evenly from both sides until we reach the center, here we'll find that these two values are going to have to represent our mean. We don't have a single value in between those, but what we'll do instead is take the average of both of those, right? So in this case, we would say our median is going to equal the average of 75 and 77, which, as we just saw, is their sum divided by the number of points. So their sum divided by 2, which is equal to 76. And we can come back to Excel and verify this using the same sort of method that we did on the last one. If I click back into my cell below the column here, instead of using the average formula or the average function on this one, here I'll type median. And so we can highlight all of our data points once again, right? This is cell A1 through cell A10. And when we close the parentheses and hit enter, we see our median value is 76. Now, another helpful tool, if you don't necessarily want to just find the median value, but you actually want to order it, right? If you remember, the first step that we took when finding the median was ordering the values from smallest to largest. There's actually a way you can do that here as well, because Excel has a really nice feature where you can sort data. And so what I'll do is I'll highlight all of the data points that I want to sort. I'll come up into the top right corner over here, click sort and filter, sort smallest to largest, and then it sorts it automatically. Now we have 0, 62, 73 all the way up to 89, 93, 97. It puts this in order from smallest to largest. And lastly, we can take a look at our final measure of central tendency, known as the mode. Now when you hear mode, basically you want to think mode most. In other words, which value shows up most frequently. Now in our data set, that's pretty easy to identify, right? We've got a small collection of data here and only one value shows up more than once, and that's 75. So our mode in this case is going to be 75. Now, it's not always quite this easy. There are two things that you want to watch out for. Number one, if every value only occurs once, then we say there is no mode. On the other hand, if we had, say, multiple values occurring most frequently, right? Say we had two 75s, two 85s, and two 100s, then all of those values would be the mode. And so mode is a little bit different than the other two in that way, in that you could have no mode or you could have multiple values of a mode. And of course, coming back to Excel, this is going to be able to compute this in a very similar way, right? We can click once again on the cell below our column of data, hit equals, and this time we will type the mode function. We can select all of the data points that we want to take the mode of, close our parenthesis. When we hit enter, we get 75. Now, this is just the beginning of what Excel is capable of as a program. If you're curious to learn more about what it can do, particularly when it comes to analyzing data, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to do more videos like this. But it is a really great tool when you want to do big sets of calculations really efficiently or have really large amounts of data that you've got to analyze quickly. I should note also, if you don't have access to Excel, Google Sheets is a really great alternative, and it works almost the same way. There are some quirks about it that are different than Excel. Excel has some advantages in some areas, Google Sheets has some advantages in others, but at least in terms of mean, median, and mode, it's going to work almost exactly the same, right? So if we look here at Sheets and copy in our data and come down to the cell below all of our data points, we can still type in equals and say average and select by clicking and dragging all of the points that we want to average. And once again, we still get 72.5. So in terms of mean, median, and mode, Google Sheets will work exactly the same way as well. I hope you found this helpful. If you do have any other questions, whether it is about the statistical side, the mean, median, mode, analyzing the numbers, or if it is about the technical side of using the technology, using Excel, using Google Spreadsheets, please don't hesitate to put any questions or comments below. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.